And I had to start again with just my children and my wife. I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, where the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, oh, from sea to shining sea. From Detroit down to Houston, and New York to LA, where there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say, oh, and I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'd rather stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. God bless this country. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless, please bless the USA.
Well, good Sunday afternoon. Welcome to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. And today I've got a friend who is coming on. We're going to be talking about a very, very interesting subject. That's geoengineering and transhumanism. My guest today is Elana Freeland. She's a writer, ghostwriter, lecturer, storyteller, and a teacher. And she's covered so many different subjects, including MK Ultra, ritual abuse, electromagnetic weapons, the geoengineering of the atmosphere. I don't know anybody that is what I would consider a better writer, better researcher, and knows more about what's going on in this transhumanist agenda than Elana Freeland. Welcome to the program, Elana. Thank you for being here.
So glad to be here with you, Dan. Such good work you're doing.
Well, we're sure trying, and I every week it just gets tougher and tougher. We've had so many problems on both networks that I work on, because they are we're running into all kinds of technical issues that we didn't have even a month or two ago. And we've lost a lot of our broadcasts as a result of it. So we record on like 5 different platforms just to make sure that we have a record of this stuff, because it disappears so fast.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I hope you've got more than YouTube, because as soon as they see my name, it seems like it goes down.
Well, we don't even think about YouTube anymore. I've been banned by them so many times that if I do, by some weird fluke, get on there, I'm usually off within a couple of days.
Yeah.
So,
Right. I guess
You
it's
know,
sort of a badge of honor now, right?
it is. It is. Everything that we do that we get censored on is a badge of honor because the truth is we're over the target. And that's exactly why there's so much flack. It's been amazing, this thing with Elon Musk, and I've never been a real huge fan of Elon Musk, but his exposés of Twitter were pretty phenomenal. And anything we can get information on, all the shadow banning, all the stuff that's going on, I think is going to be really, really critical. But you've got a reissuance of your global transhumanism. Let's talk about that because you're going to be coming out with a new book on geoengineered transhumanism, and it's going to be like a sequel to the earlier book and maybe adding some upgrades to make it more contemporary.
Right. I was approached like a year ago by Inner Traditions publishing company, and they wanted to do a second edition of geoengineered transhumanism. And geoengineered transhumanism, I should say the subtitle because then that'll tell why it is a 650-page monster of a book. Geoengineered transhumanism, how the environment has been weaponized by chemicals, electromagnetism, and nanotechnology for synthetic biology. So what Inner Traditions wants to do is do the second edition in 2 books and make it an easier platform for people to read. So the first book is on geoengineering as it relates to synthetic biology, and the second book is on synthetic biology as it relates to geoengineering. So I get this amazing, strange opportunity to actually rewrite a book I've already written. That's a first in my life. And because things are moving so fast, each book is pretty different from the original big book. I just finished the geoengineering book, and it's far smaller, about half the size of the other one. And I'm really satisfied with it because I was able to concentrate more on what I think is the primary revolution now regarding transhumanism that we really need to concentrate on learning as much as we can about, and that is nanotechnology. That is a revolution that happened. Well, it really happened, I think, back in the 90s, but it was quietly done. And it wasn't until 2003 that anything was on the roster in the U.S. Congress about nanotechnology. I mean, wow, that's 13 years from when it was, because I think the military was pursuing it with great gusto in the 90s because they saw it. In fact, it's similar to what we're hearing about now, Dan, regarding the graphene oxide that is in the serums that is being injected into people. It's being called by biotech the holy grail of science because it has so many uses, and it's very quiet, and so is nanotechnology. In fact, graphene oxide is a nanotechnology. Mm-hmm. And when we were way back in the past, when Clifford Carnicom, the independent scientist, was collecting data in the 90s, late 90s, from what the jets above northern New Mexico were spewing out the back and out of the wings, he discovered the term Morgellons to describe the fibers and filaments he was finding in all of the stuff coming down from these jets. So Morgellons too It's a bad title. It's not really his. It's 1700s. I think it was first used for a skin ailment back then. And I assume that the people who tacked this word, this name onto this, what is proven to be a nanotechnology, was probably the CIA or Raytheon or Lockheed Martin, one of the big controllers of the whole HARP system, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project that I write about, and that has to do with the synthetic biology program going on now through the inoculation. So, I mean, it's such a big picture that I do my best to lay it out in increments. But on the other hand, Americans have not really been versed in technology, the very technologies they've become pretty much addicted to for convenience, comfort, entertainment, fast phone calls, whatever it is. We've sort of been sold a bill of goods, because while we're playing with our toys that are making life so fun, behind the scenes, this technology has been laid for a transhumanist race and future. And that's kind of what geoengineered transhumanism does, is it lays out how the environment was really the first thing they concentrated on for transhumanism, other than talking endlessly on shows and at consortiums. But it's the takeover of the environment to make it actually unfriendly to what I'm calling in the book Human 1.0, the natural human being, the God-given human being that now is being usurped and replaced by a cyber human being, which I'm calling Human 2.0. So, this is the drama of the millennium, as far as I'm concerned, because if we lose the natural God-given humanity, we also lose our human evolution that is dependent upon our freedom, upon our free will, and our lives become dictated to by technologies that we can't really see. And therefore, the generations coming after the generations on the earth today will, of course, not even realize that they are not the new definition of human. They will feel that this is the way humanity has always been, et cetera. Every generation's taken advantage of that wave, Dan. And I see that now. I see how long the plans are of these global elites. That's what I call them. They are centuries long, millennia long. And they pass from generation to generation, secret society to secret society. And this is our big dilemma. And in a way, I'm grateful to what has happened in the last 3 years when life has become so onerous, because a lot of us are waking up now that it is not a given that our government will take care of us. It is not a given that experts will do the best they can for us. We are waking up to these halls of power that have always taken advantage of the little guy. And I'm all for the little guy. I mean, that's why my education, everything, it goes toward awakening humanity so we do not lose that natural human being.
Well, you are a Christian, and that does make a difference.
Yes.
Because what we're talking is very much a satanic idea. It's very much remaking man from being in God's image to being in man's image. And that is so absolutely anti-Christian. There's no other way to describe it, but satanic. That's just what it is.
Oh, yes. And I'm constantly posting on the one Facebook site I'm allowed still, and my gab.com page about Satanism, because I'm very familiar with it, having studied satanic ritual abuse and MK Ultra. I mean, how could I not be aware of it? It is a real religion. It has an inverted way of pursuing the divine, their idea of the divine, and it needs to be known about, maybe not studied to the degree I've studied it, but to at least know that this evil is very organized. It has made tremendous headway in my lifetime. I mean, I'm just in shock.
I am too. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, that's another part of the story. And the nanotechnology is really not that far from it, in the sense that nanotech is produced by laying one atom next to another atom next to another atom. That's how the construction happens of a nanometer. And all the things made with nanotechnology, the sky's the limit. I mean, it's another
Absolutely.
holy grail of science, of technology, I'd say. And to realize that this atomic level construction is very similar to the Manhattan Project in the 30s and 40s. In that case, it was a huge bomb that was produced, a huge explosion. In this case, this is also a Manhattan Project along the perimeter of the quantum levels of reality that we humans have known very little of over our long process of trying to evolve. So that in itself indicates that, again, the moral has been thrown out. Again, the technology is being pursued just for the sake of the technology and all the power that it can put into the hands of very few. So this awakening that we're going through now because of what we've been through the last few years is very good. We can use this awakening for many levels of knowledge that will help us not just to survive, but to, in my mind, Dan, it's all about how are we going to, in the sense of the nanobots, the nanorobots inside our bodies and brain, is it possible for us to wield our own human authority over them, rather than just through a 5G, 6G remote computer guy on a laptop who's running our nervous system? Is it possible that we can develop a relationship with this nanotech? Because there is no getting it out of us really in the long run, to my knowledge. So we have to find another way.
Well, it's all about free will. It's all about eliminating our ability to make choices for ourselves. It's all about a command control system. And I know you are a huge Tesla fan. I'm a unabridged Tesla fan.
Yes.
Because he was absolutely the most brilliant physicist that ever lived. I mean, in my mind, he made Einstein look like a kindergartner. He was just a nothing compared to Tesla. But Tesla understood that our natural environment is an electromagnetic environment. There's a natural rhythm. There's a natural electrical connection to the human beings, and it's part of our very nature. And what they've done is they've exploited that to try to figure out ways to take advantage of us and to steal our ability to control our own lives. I mean, that's a very simple-minded statement, but I think that's really at the heart of the whole thing.
Well, the electromagnetic part, we definitely need that part to think. That's the interesting thing about the brain and the nervous system that are so extraordinary in the human being. is that it is very responsive to electromagnetism. So whether it's an alpha wave or a beta wave or a delta wave, whatever the wave is, it's all in hertz. It's all cycles per second of pulsing coming in. That's kind of our curse and our blessing, right, Dan? I mean, we can think from that, but look at how vulnerable we are to an electromagnetic world that is wireless in an atmosphere that I point out again and again in 6 Ways to Sunday, an ionized atmosphere, which means it's an electric atmosphere. This is not a natural atmosphere we're living in now. And Clifford Carnicom, he saw that back in 1999. He was able to measure the atmosphere with devices and said, this is not the atmosphere we have had before. So there's another part to this that Tesla, I don't know where he stood on ether. I know he knew that ether existed. And ether is the other part of us that we are even less aware of as a substance, I have to call it, that was absolutely accepted in scientific circles for millennia before the 1920s, when the scientism guys in America, that's what I call them, scientism, not real scientists, sort of bureaucrat scientists, when they decided that we would not use the concept of ether anymore. So they forbade Einstein to use it anymore. Einstein had been using it. They forbade all other scientists, and it was tossed out. And without that concept, we can't understand the natural life, the natural planet, the beauty of nature and the wisdom of nature, of God's nature, that everything has come from, like a cornucopia. So, to me, I always think of both concepts, the electromagnet and the etheric. And I take the etheric like Wilhelm Reich. People have considered him to be some sort of false scientist. Not at all. He called it orgone, but he was talking about ether. And he was using ether as a free energy. And he wanted that, just like Tesla did. He wanted that ether to be a free energy for all of humanity. But of course, big oil and big nuclear and big everything else in the energy department cannot allow that, because then they won't make profit from it. Then they won't have power over us. So it's a very important thing to look at energy from a vantage point of the different kinds of levels that we can come at it from, and how controlled that is today.
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, you bring up the ether, but the idea that Tesla created that free energy platform down outside of Colorado Springs, and he was actually funded with a grant by Morgan, J.P. Morgan. But Morgan, when he found out that Tesla wanted that to be free to the world, all of a sudden the funding went away and the project was burned to the ground.
That's right. Yes, it was. I mean, Tesla had gone so far as to do Wardenclyffe, which I consider a precursor. Wardenclyffe was a huge tower that he built with Morgan money out on Long Island. And he was performing experiments there that were pre-HAARP, but very much like an ionospheric heater. So, Tesla withdrew from, once he realized that the America he thought he had been coming to for freedom, et cetera, was really not, because of all the money he needed for his science. He withdrew. And then in 1943, I believe he was killed by the FBI, and his research taken, and given over to President Donald Trump's uncle, John Trump.
John.
And he was a physicist, and he then figured out who got what. from the Tesla tech. And yet, the SDI program that a lot of people who followed politics since the 80s know about, the Strategic Defense Initiative, that, what we call it the Star Wars program, because they pre-programmed us with the Star Wars entertainment film trilogy just 3 years before the SDI program was announced. They sold it as a missile defense program, but it really never was. It was this that we have now, but what they didn't have back then was they did not control the ionosphere, and they did not have an ionized atmosphere. So that all had to come before they could really bring the SDI program to its fullness, which Lockheed Martin calls the space fence. And I, too, call it the space fence. Lockheed Martin owns all the patents for it, owned a lot of the patents for the SDI as well. So now we have the consummation of the SDI program as a space fence lockdown. And that was my second book, Under an Ionized Sky, from chemtrails to space fence lockdown. And it's important to know because that entails our nervous system. That entails our endocrine system. And that's where we get into the advent of the synthetic biology coming to replace all this wonderful, natural, God-given body, and particularly nervous system, with synthetic biotech created in the lab, gain of function, et cetera, is intent upon changing us over. And I think that's how I look at the inoculation where we are now, is that is the advent of the first race of transhumanism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's right. And what you're talking about, I know a lot of people have an inkling of how this is happening, but at the same time, you get into the details in such a good way because you literally separate this into the smallest parts so that people can see and understand how all these dots connect, because they do. It's like you talk about ether, but you talk about, the synthetic biology that's being created. There's a reason that so many people have cancer now. There's a reason that so many nervous disorders and all the rest of the things that are happening to humanity, it was planned that way because they think there's way too many of us anyway, and they've been eugenicists for the last 100 years trying to figure out ways to get rid of the most people without getting caught. And that's really what it is, because they know that if the people of the world understand how diabolically evil and how this technology is being used, the average people would be up in arms immediately. And they've kept this under the wrap so that everybody just thinks it's a natural thing, and it's the most unnatural thing in the world, what's happening to us.
It is, and I think that one of the problems in America, and I don't know if you remember, but I had tea with John Kennedy in the Rose Garden 3 months before he was killed. I was 16 years old. I was at Girls Nation. Bill Clinton, I guess, was there. He talked about it. He was at Boys Nation. And that day with Kennedy, where, a real public figure was right there in front of me. And then when he was murdered in Dallas, I had to then go to the civic groups that had paid for my trip to Washington and give another talk about my day with Kennedy. And in that case, it was very different because people were sobbing, people were running from the room. It was chaos, and it was great grief, whether you were a Democrat or a Republican, to murder a president in broad day was was a huge turning point for this nation. And so for me, America, and I'm the granddaughter of immigrants. I was raised in an immigrant community until I was 9 or 10. And I loved it. I loved every minute of it. Many languages in my neighborhood, many wonderful foods, dance, singing, fantastic. So to me, America, that was what it was for then. And now it's been sort of usurped by technology and the technocrats who see a very different future from the one I would want to see. And so when you get into that, that kind of, I don't call it patriotism exactly, but I really understand the value of America to the world. And now we're pretty much despised everywhere, though people abroad seem to still have the wisdom that it's not the American people doing this, but it is the American people allowing this to happen. And it is the American people who have allowed a lot of things, a lot of water to go under the bridge since John Kennedy's assassination. And that has been extremely disappointing to me. And I have worked so hard, and why I continue to work hard, to bring back a sense of what we were carrying, whether we were born in 1776 or not. We are the carriers of a great dream. And I have not put that down. So to me, the whole technology thing, whether or whoever wins the next election, whoever sits in office and signs executive orders, whoever it is, we still have this technology to deal with. And it has gotten way out of control. I mean, you were saying a while ago that people are, I don't know how you put it, but that they're not really making the decisions that they could be making. Part of the problem there, Dan, is that this technology, particularly HAARP, and I talk about this in at least 2 of the 3 books I've written, it pulses a frequency into our ionized atmosphere that is inimical to us being able to think and be able to reason. And so I'm not so hard on Americans because they don't seem to be able to think, simply because they are subject to this technology that they don't even know about. And if they did know about it, they could turn it around, because human consciousness is quite powerful. And for those who know Christ and the higher powers of this universe, it's even easier to be able to take hold of that and say, "Get behind me, Satan. No, you will not run my thoughts. You will not run my behavior. You will not run my thinking, my feelings, and my emotions." This is what I want people to know, is the 5G, 6G dynamic duo is here to run the tiny world in us already, the nanobots that we have breathed from these chemical trails for 2.5 decades. Geoengineering is not just starting up now, my friends. It has been running all this time, very quietly, very silently, because it is highly classified. And that's what I really want people to know is, you know, we have to, in a way, think like we're paranoids now. I mean, I feel kind of embarrassed by that, but I live in a way through my lifestyle where I am constantly aware of the invisible realm that is that electromagnetic realm that I know I don't understand as well as someone who goes to MIT or one of the top 10. I know I don't understand it as well, but if I study it, and if I then start to use my imagination and look around my little apartment here and say, all right, there are waves in here passing through my apartment, through my body, through my brain that I can't see. because my electromagnetic spectrum visual range is so tiny compared to all the rest. So tiny. It was meant as a protection for us. I know that. But now there are machines that are very expensive and very, very sophisticated that can see into realms that we cannot see. So I use my imagination instead to be able to take hold of my apartment and say, all right, I know there are waves traveling through here that are probably 5G at least, and 4G plus, which is almost the same as 5G, by the way. Okay, I'm going to put devices in my light sockets that broadcast a benign frequency to confront and stave off the effect on my organism and my mind of these other basically inimical frequencies. I mean that might the 5G millimeter waves, these are not good for these human bodies that we love and have been given to take care of. So that's how I'm doing it with the invisible realm. I mean, think of the nanobots. They're invisible too, unless I have some high-tech electron microscope that can go that deep. However, Tony Pantalaresco, the herbalist, the Canadian herbalist that I've sent a lot of people to who are having many symptoms that they don't know what to do with, that may have to do with nanotechnology and certainly with electromagnetism. Tony has said over and over again that there is a way to counter the nanotechnology through our consciousness. But remember, we're breathing more every day because the military and the geoengineers are up there in the stratosphere, laying more and more what they call chaff, which is a doping element for electromagnetism to keep the atmosphere primed for wireless transmissions, of which there are millions, maybe billions of transmissions now. So we're kind of stuck with the technology, and we need to find a way to protect our ability to think our way through our lives and claim our own thoughts and claim our own feelings. So I want people to know about that aspect.
I think it's really important. And I go back and I look at some of the things that I read about. I took Popular Science magazine when I was a kid. I started getting that magazine, I think, when I was about 8 or 9 years old. And it used to be that Popular Science had a whole section in there that was talking about all the different technologies and sciences that were being developed for the military. I learned about so much stuff back in the 60s and early 70s about what was going on with the military. We were talking hyperdrives for jet aircraft and all these things that now are just barely starting to be talked about. I read about a lot of this stuff 50 years ago, 60 years ago.
That's right.
It was there. And then, of course, 9/11, among other things, they took all of the military stuff out of Popular Science magazine because they didn't want people reading about that.
Yeah, a big clampdown happened then, didn't it, with 9/11, and a lot of lying became even worse. I mean, we always had lies because as long as you have politics and power, you're going to have lies. But this just bloomed into a real sort of netherworld kind of lying that was, I mean, now we're at the point where the lies are so transparent if you've done any reading or thinking about the past and what we're into now. But for the young generations, they don't have that advantage of having watched this over decades like you and I do. And for some reason, I don't feel that a lot of them are listening, probably because they've been convinced by the programming through their TVs and their iPhones that we blew it. That, let's blame the 60s generation for not having done what it should have done, when no one seems to remember that we were like 19 or 20 or 21 years old, as I remember, and we're just trying to figure things out ourselves.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. You go back and look at some of the science fiction writing, though, at the time.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff that we're talking about now, the reality that we're talking about was science fiction writing that I was reading about when I was 15 years old. It was there. They were trying to let us know that this information was out there, the nanotechnology. One of the most interesting books I ever read in my life was Michael Crichton. Of course, he was a genius. There's no question about that.
Yes.
And he wrote a book called Prey, and I think this was around 2000. Yes. It was really far back there. And he was talking about self-assembling nanotechnology that could literally create an entire being, and it could do it all with just self-replicating, the ability to build yourself with nanobots.
Oh, yes. Oh, I have in the appendix of the Geoengineered Transhumanism his little essay, and he did. He would write these fiction books. The one I'm thinking of is in Jurassic Park. He wrote the introduction, which is a mini essay on how biotech is already out of control. I mean, he was phenomenal. And you mentioned the book Prey. I think right after it, he died of fast-acting cancer. Now, every time I see the words fast-acting, I immediately think CIA. That's that's what I've learned over the decades that I've been tracing and tracking all of this stuff. And as long as we're talking this way about the past, I highly recommend to people that they read a series they probably don't even know I've written, which is called Sub Rosa America, A Deep State History. It's a fictional approach to real history of what's happened to America since John Kennedy's assassination. And in there, I deal with a lot of things that are under the rug, sub rosa, under the rose. They're hidden, and they're purposely hidden. And I bring them out for a look by a band of 60s people who get on the road on the mother road of Route 66 from California to head for Dallas to see where John Kennedy was shot. And a lot happens to them in that journey. It's sort of a pilgrimage, just like a pilgrimage. I've taken a few pilgrimages myself. So I highly recommend that people, if reading history is just too dull, or you feel that you're too late in life to start learning how to read all the history that you need in order to catch up with what's going on, I suggest you start with Sub Rosa America, because it is all history. In fact, I have an 85-page bibliography of some of the books I read in order to write those books. 1,300 pages over 4 books. And I think it's really, Dan, I know you didn't know about it, but I think it's my magnum opus, because I really get to comment there and look at a lot of stuff about America that I really felt compelled to do because I met John Kennedy and because of what happened to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's no question at all that the CIA was involved in his assassination in front and center. I mean, they were it. And we can talk all the nonsense we want, but I realized that the whole thing was a scam. I was 13 years old when he was killed, And I'd been a shoe shine boy since I was 8 years old. I went out and walked around town and went to all the bars and shined shoes. And as a result of that, it was how I could afford to live, because my mom had no money. My dad died when I was 7 years old, and I don't want to get into my whole history, but the bottom line is that's how I basically supported myself from the time I was 8. And one of the things I did was I subscribed to a magazine called Shotgun News. And it had all these military surplus rifles and things that I could order, which I did. That was when you could still do that sort of thing. And the one thing I recognize is that a 6.5 Carcano carbine, like the one that they put in the book depository with a $4 cheap scope on it, was not physically possible by the best marksman in the world to be able to pull off 3 rounds accurately in a matter of 2.5 seconds. There was just no way it could be done. And so it immediately, to me, from the very first instance when they showed that rifle, I knew that it was a setup. I just knew it was. And it's been a downhill go from there. So I don't know why I even got into that, but the CIA, I guess, is behind so much of this. And you mentioned Tesla and the OSS, which John Trump was part of OSS.
Oh, I see.
And that became the CIA.
Right.
And if anybody wants to know what's been funding so much of the skunk works, other than all the illicit drugs that they've been peddling all over, they had Tesla's technology, and that's a lot of the stuff that's been conducted through the skunk works.
Well, and let's add another thing besides the Kennedy assassination, laying at the feet of the altar of the CIA, is that they were the original owners of the patents for HAARP. They were the ones, CIA first. Bernard Eastland was the scientist who came up with the patents, but it was run by the CIA, overseen by the CIA. Until then, it was passed to Raytheon, which is virtually a synonym for the CIA, as is Lockheed Martin. I mean, if people knew what this so-called agency has grown into, it's a behemoth. It's a monster. And it has its own paws in everything in the United States. So it's like being run by the KGB, to translate it into a language that people think think the Russians have problems. We have a really big problem with that CIA. So they were involved from the beginning. Then it went to the U.S. Air Force. Then it went to the U.S. Navy. And finally, in 2013, we were able, we being the United States military, were able to control the ionosphere through HAARP and its power. And the control of the ionosphere and the control of the jet stream are a done deal, which is why there is no natural weather in the United States whatsoever. And that, I will stand behind that, because you study just the principles of this technology, you see how it works. It is a done deal. So, when we heard about this earthquake in Turkey, I immediately looked for the certain signs that I lay out in the very first book I wrote about geoengineering, Chemtrails, HAARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth. That's where I talk about Fukushima in there. I talk about the Haitian earthquake. Hurricane. I talk about the one in New Orleans, the one Sandy up in New York. I even talk about the hurricane that was held offshore during 9/11 as a means for energy, for the directed energy operation that went on with the towers. So, let's catch up to what this technology can do that's been overseen by intelligence from the very get-go. because this is the weapon for planetary control. They want planetary control. I always talk about the Russian astrophysicist named Nikolai Kardashev. They have taken his paradigm for power over the solar system, and they are applying it because the geoengineering is actually a handmaiden to the secret space program that Catherine Austin Fitts and others have exposed as stealing not just $21 trillion from the American budget, but I think the last time I checked, it was up to $57 trillion. Mm-hmm. And that is part of the so-called chemtrails, the so-called, the cloudy skies, the lack of sunshine, has nothing to do with mitigating climate change or global warming or, the carbon's nonsense. I mean, these are all cover stories for the ignorant. And I have written these books to try to catch people up to the truth, because I have this idea, Dan, that what I don't want to do, or what I'm going to try to do, is to die with as few lies in my soul as possible. This is my great life objective, and why I am such I am so obsessive about pursuing the truth, whatever it costs me. And that's important. I'm very happy I chose not to get a PhD, because I think having a PhD in science now is kind of risky for people to be able to have the freedom to speak out. That's the only thing I can imagine as to why I'm the only one writing these books. Where are the scientists? Why aren't they writing about this? I know that a lot of them know. But, what's up, guys? Are you just afraid? Have you signed an NDA? Has your family been threatened? What is the problem? We must let humanity know what the cost is of this geoengineered world now.
That's fantastic. Elana, we are kindred spirits. I have to tell you that I pray every day that the Lord will give me wisdom and truth, because we need to understand what the truth really is, because everything is so skewed now. Frankly, almost everything we see is lies. There's hardly any truth in the world anymore.
Yes. It's amazing. And I keep thinking of the younger generations coming in. They don't know any different. They think it's always been this way, just nothing but a bunch of liars. And why not just eat, drink, and be merry, and take drugs and just check out of all these lies by the older generations. Unfortunately, they don't understand that someday they're going to be the older generation. And what do they have? What have they earned? What have they gotten from squeezing as far as you can all of these different truths and lies in order to see what they're made of? You have to be able to do that. And my 60s generation, that's, again, in Sub Rosa America, the 60s generation I knew was not the Time magazine version, which is sex, drugs, and rock and roll. No, I'm sorry. It was not that version. I knew people who were extremely intelligent. We had long conversations into the night, drinking maybe a little wine, maybe smoking a cigarette, talking about history. I mean, because we had the liberal arts education then, which now is gone. I mean, it's totally gone. We were able to study other cultures. Yeah, primarily European, because a lot of it came from Europe then, but not just Europe. We studied a lot of things, and we were all spiritual seekers in our own way. I mean, some of us were getting lost. Some of us didn't make it. But in the characters in these fictional accounts I give of 1970 America, when these kids take off for Dallas to see where John Kennedy was killed, they are trying their best to have a real life, and they have long conversations. And so I try to give a sense to people, especially young people. And there are some young people who've read those books and go, wow, I had no idea. It never occurred to me that the 60s generation would have been like that, of seekers, of really people who wanted to know the truth. And I don't want to disappoint these younger generations, Dan. I am standing up to the best of my ability now. I'm giving it everything I've got, just like you do, in order to be an example of what it takes to be a truly spiritual being, not just a Christian. A lot of people don't like Christianity. I think they don't understand what it is. And it's really a religion of revelation. Had I not had a revelation in the middle of a college classroom in 1974 or 73, I don't know, I might have missed the boat. But somebody came for me. And when it was finally identified of who it was, I didn't even recognize, because I hadn't been raised as a Christian. I knew nothing about the nomenclature or anything, but somebody had come for me. And when they said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, I didn't even know. I'd never heard that phrase. I had no idea. So I had to sneak around in my 60s generation and ask people, have you ever heard this phrase? And finally, not the first person, but finally someone said, yeah, that's how Jesus Christ identified himself. Mm-hmm. And then I immediately went, oh no, does that mean I'm going to have to be a Christian? Because I'd never met a Christian I admired. I'd never met one. No. So then it went from there to where the best thing in the world happened, and I have been made over all these years, 20 some years. I had to be made over by the Holy Spirit. So for me, it's a living reality, my Christianity, my spirituality, and I dwell inside it. So I don't argue with people about it. I don't try to evangelize. I simply try to present the best example I possibly can of how one person, just me, is living this spiritual reality of this time, this era that is so important, such a crossover right now. It's requiring everything we have.
Well, and you know, I love it, because actually I've gone through a very similar process myself. But it goes back 2 generations before us, back to around 1900, when this transformation started to happen to our country. And my dad was a card-carrying communist back in the 30s, and he was not only he was a hardcore atheist. And you go back 1 generation past him, because that's where so many of these things like H.G. Wells, these futurists that were trying to describe the world that they were going to create, what they wanted to see happen. And it was actually starting to happen even back then.
Yes.
You know, so what you're talking about, it is absolutely spot on with the situation I went through. Very similar, because my dad was a hardcore anti-Christian, and my mother tried to give us kids a little bit of a Christian, at least an idea what it was. And it was when I was in my 20s when I really went through that transition. But you talked about ether. You talk about the electromagnetism, and then you mentioned ether. See, I think ether is what is really our soul.
Yes.
I think that is that essence. It's
Yes.
the essence of humanity, and that's where ether comes into the equation.
Well, it is, okay, so I've been very influenced by Rudolf Steiner. Now, what most people don't know, especially Christians, is that Rudolf Steiner, the reason he left the Theosophists back in Berlin, back in the 19th century, or the early 20th, is because he had a full-on experience of Christ and completely changed his point of reference for the occult. Now, the word occult to most people means something negative, something like, Satanism, all dark, but it isn't. It simply means hidden. And so there are many things hidden that come to the fore. And one of them was, for Rudolf Steiner, was the second coming. And the second coming, he said, would be in the ether. Now, here I am I'm up to 13 years in this, writing these books, doing this research, giving these talks, and it has to do for me with the fact that I can feel the second coming has begun. And it's in the ether, and that's why I'm defending the ether, the etheric of the earth, the life force, the élan vital, whatever you want to call it. Every culture has a name for this, which is not electromagnetics. This is a life current that is free energy, but it is also benign. And now I'm sorry to say that I have finally come to the conclusion after these years that the geoengineers are now they have weaponized the etheric they control. And this is very bad news to me, because if Christ is coming in the etheric, the etheric Christ coming, and he said he would come, the disciples asked him in Acts, how shall we know when you come again? I shall come as you see me go. And he goes in the clouds. So I think that's why I'm so obsessed with the clouds, because these clouds that we're seeing above, these are not the old clouds. These are plasma clouds. These are created clouds. They're electromagnetic. They're gases that have been electrified, and they are being used as the cloud, as they call it. Whether it's Google's cloud or Amazon's cloud, whoever's cloud it is, DARPA's cloud, they are utilizing the ether, which is what our clouds used to be made of. They have weaponized them. So for me, the etheric has many levels, right? There's the free energy, there's where you can use it in exotic propulsion craft. You can utilize the etheric in order to as a projectile. It's actually not pushing, it's actually pulling through an etheric type of technology. Yes, that is already a done deal. And you don't have to import it from Alpha Centauri or aliens or anything. It's a technology we've had it since we brought the Nazis over. So then you have another level of etheric, which is your health. You have the etheric in your body, which is what makes you healthy, makes your immune system powerful. And to understand how to keep it healthy, well, the opposite of the etheric is electromagnetism. It's a no-brainer. That is deleterious to our organism, period. I don't even own an iPhone. I told you that before, Dan, didn't I? I don't own an iPhone. I don't own a TV. Why do I want all that stuff that's programming me and filling me with a constant field of electromagnetism? So, these are concepts that, ironically, they have to do with technology, and they have to do with spirit and being spiritual beings. living on the earth, which is very physical, but there are many spiritual things going on here. And that's really why we're here, is to learn from it and do what we can for the spiritual evolution of the planet, of the people, of the human soul, of the spirit. I mean, I have people come to me that say they have very tiny lives, not like mine. I'm like, what is a tiny life? I have no idea. If you take it up, it becomes large. That's all.
Well, you say something that I've believed my entire life, and that is our capabilities that God gave us. Our capabilities are thousands of times greater than our understanding of what our abilities are. Thousands, maybe millions of times. I mean, there's literally limitless what our capabilities are that God gave us, but others are the ones that try to keep us from realizing those potentials.
Exactly.
And that's our essence. That's the soul. I mean, I think the human soul is at the center of the entire universe, the human soul, and that's what God gave us. That's what was imparted to us. And I say to me, that's tied with the ether, with ethereal. It is an idea that our essence is something that we are only in the very early stages of even understanding.
Yes, and then here come the thieves. Here come the thieves to steal that from us.
Take it all. Yep.
To run us remotely by 5G and 6G systems and make our minds not our own anymore, and there will be, as Yuval Harari said very clearly, there will be no more of this nonsense of free will and the soul. If you need a statement as to how this war looks, I'm very grateful to Mr. Harari for being my poster boy of Satanism.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
The inversion of everything. I can't believe my good fortune to have lived long enough to be here for this. When I was younger, I didn't think everybody talked about the end of the establishment and this establishment will fall. And I just didn't think I would live long enough to be a participant, but I hoped I would. I hoped I would be here for the Holy War, because I'm put together for holy wars. I'm a warrior through and through. So we are very fortunate to be here now. Beware, and I say to your listeners, beware of depression. I keep hearing about depression. Consider it a weapon. Consider it a frequency weapon. Consider that it's coming from somewhere else and really has nothing to do with your personal life. Don't start digging around trying to figure out why you woke up depressed this morning. It simply is an assault tactic. And frequency, as Tesla told us again and again, frequency and vibration are everything if you want to understand how this universe works. And that is what that is. So make sure you don't get hoodwinked, a great Masonic word, by the way. You don't get hoodwinked by the parties that want you to think that you're a nothing and you're this and you're not that and nobody loves you and et cetera, all that taped stuff. Just, please join Dan and me. We're much more fun than that way of looking at the fragility of life. I mean, I think that's what's happened, Dan, is people have been convinced that in a spiritless universe, that you are just under one peril after another. And you're going to have to bow down and give up this freedom and this and that in order to be taken care of, in order to be watched over. But that is a lie. That is a lie. And what we are here for is to develop our free will through our own capability and our strength that comes from the divine. All you have to do is ask. I mean, ask and ye shall receive. I mean, that is more than words. Believe me, I have tested it many times. And now it seems I'm at a point at 75 where I don't have to barter for more strength. It seems to just be flowing through me now. Now, I probably should knock on some wood somewhere, but I do believe that this is part of the soul life that I have dedicated to myself to for many years, and that it is simply now just a part of the supernatural nature, supernatural nature, whatever you want to call it, and you can call upon it to face any depression or anything that seems to be coming from somewhere else. If you really examine it, I think you'll find that it is not, its point of origin is not you. Mm-hmm. It's coming from somewhere else.
No, I think that's completely true. And what you're talking about is, again, it goes back to that idea of the ether. You are expanding your universe and in seeking truth. And in doing that, it gives you strength. It gives you strength because you're doing what ultimately, what I believe God wants us to be doing. And that is learning and expanding our universe as much as we can to learn more and more about what is true.
Absolutely. Just so, like I said, I do not want to die. I want to die with as few lies in my soul as possible. So I'm trying to learn all I can. Knowledge is power, so that I have the truth that is not compromised.
Mm-hmm. That's well said. That's absolutely well said. Well, let's just talk about, you brought up Yuval Noah Harari, but you're right. If there's anybody that, in my mind, is the epitome of what we are up against, it's him and people of his ilk that say there is no God. We are our own gods. We can be God. I am God. And therefore, I can create whatever I want. And I can do it because I have the power to do that. That is so wrong when we get a twisted idea like that. But there's something that, and I'm going to ask you this. Everything that is, in my mind, is mechanical and satanic and in that origin, it always goes back to numbers. It's always tied back to numbers. They can't do anything that isn't tied back to numbers. That's the only way their world works, is if they can digitize literally everything.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, okay, when you first said numbers, I thought of how one thing I like about Satanists is that they take the divine very seriously, because that is, the good divine is the ultimate enemy of the beings that Satanists are, that are indwelling Satanists. That's how I see it. Mm-hmm. You do the rites, you do the rituals, you go through the initiations, you have the baby killings and the drinking of blood and all the rest that goes with a satanic ritual. And as you open to that through the eyes, through your senses, through being there, and the whole witness thing that goes on in the crowd that have been invited to the latest ritual. I mean, I can see it very clearly. Then your portals, your spiritual portals open. And now the entities who have gathered for the sake of the blood, and it's always the blood that draws them, they will now enter you and begin to take you over. Okay, so that's basically how it works. And when it works that way, the evil is sort of develops a life of its own according to what the person they've entered is like. They'll use their personality, they'll use their ideals, their usually traumatic childhood, whatever it is, they'll use that in order to be that person so that no one notices, particularly unless someone is very sophisticated in how they can see. They will see that something has happened to that person and they're not the same anymore. I think that is, as long as I'm on that topic, that is what is happening now with some of the inoculated, is that they have changed. They are not the same as they were. And this mechanical thing that you mentioned is taking over. And they simply are losing that human 1.0 quality that usually comes through the windows of the soul, but can also be simply in the body language, like the stiffness that is now coming in some people. They're all having a bit of a stiffness. These are the signs and wonders of how this whole two different factions coming against each other, how you can start to see this invisible silent warfare that is going on a very big level. And then now I've forgotten where you started me off on the question.
Well, I see that the Satanists, the other side, I mean, we'll call them globalists, we'll call them Satanists, whatever. Everything they do has to function within a very predefined order. And it's very numeric, it's very digital, it's very necessary that we can't think outside the box. That's where, in my mind, ether is completely outside the box.
It is. Yeah, you're right.
And so they have to put everything into an order that they can comprehend so that they can control it.
Right. And when I started out and then got into talking about the ritual, I said that they know, the thing I like about Satanists is they know there is a divine, and they know what they're up against. And one of the things divine has in it, whether you're talking about the good divine or the bad divine, is number. And number is like from the very beginning. I mean, we say in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word is God. So yes, it is the Word, but it is also number when you're coming to the formation of the world. And so they love that divine. They keep that divine principle because that is definitely true. And really, they are tremendous students of technology. They pursue it with a vengeance because they want the earth to be a machine run by them as the gods of the planet. And
that's what they call science. That's what they call science. It isn't science. It's technocracy. It's technology.
It's technology. And they're very good at technology, but they're not very creative in the sense of anything etheric, like you're saying. No, they don't understand that. They don't like the life principle. They want things to be machine-like. That's why they're so captivated by Saturn, because Saturn at one time was a living planet, is what we are led to believe by many of the world myths, millions of years ago, even that Saturn was in the same vicinity as the Earth, And now, and I talk about this, Saturn has those amazing rings around it, but the geoengineers are building a ring around our planet at the equator. And there are videos you can see of it. It's called, this is the space fence. This is the outer limit of the space fence. And it is made up of many of the heavy metals that they're dumping up in the stratosphere that end up doing a centrifugal thing around the planet. And then the rest all fall down here where we breathe them in, and they take over our bodies as little battery systems for the nanotech that we're also breathing in. That's kind of how that works. So we're getting a ring around the planet. Years ago, I asked Billy Hayes. Remember Billy Hayes, Dan?
I do.
Yes, the harp man. Billy Hayes, I asked him, I said, what's with this ring around the planet that they're making? And he said, it's a CD-ROM. And I said, what do you mean it's a CD-ROM? He said, it's an energy system they can use for communication, and they can use it as a recorder. And I realized what he was saying was, oh, this is their Akashic record. This is where they're going to hold all of the things they want to remember and remember the Earth by. So this idea of turning the Earth into a Saturn of some sort, I think there's real. I think that's real, and there is a secret society called the Saturnalian Brotherhood, and they have a very large holding at NASA.
I'll be darned. I did not know that.
Yes. So I think the more we think according to the, I was talking about Nikolai Kardashev's dream, first you establish full spectrum dominance over your planet. Second, you establish full spectrum dominance over your star. That would be the sun. And then third, you establish full spectrum dominance over your solar system and ultimately the galaxy. All right, so, it gets a little hazy for us to start thinking like hubris beyond belief, to think of running the galaxy. But to run the sun, oh no, I think that they're well on their way to doing that. I've been watching how they're manipulating the so-called solar minimum. But no, that there's a lot. Recently, we had a big explosion on the sun. Oh, that was them. That was not anything natural. So there is this, and what does the Satanism have to do with this? Well, alliances with the dark side for the sake of power. We have heard about this for thousands of years, and I think there is still juice in that. I'd like to think that the rituals don't work anymore, because a lot of rituals don't work anymore. Native Americans talk about this, about how their rituals have lost some energy. But in the sense of Satanism, remember Michael Aquino, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino?
Oh,
And he wrote Mind Wars, which is sort of the manual still being used by the military, by the bad side of the military, I think I'll say.
And he was a Satanist.
He was the head of the Temple of Set. He was a Satanist par excellence. And he was in charge of the Operation Phoenix over in Cambodia that was illegal. He was running mind control over there. No, the guy, I have a whole appendix on him in this book, because I want people to know that the military has been taken over to some degree, a very large degree, I might add. So this idea of technology and Satanism, yeah, they go together very nicely, very nicely. And that's why the ignorance that most people have of technology is not pleasing to me. Because it's like you have an enemy. Would George Patton have gone for that? That he'd say, oh, that's too much work. I don't want to study Rommel's, everything about Rommel, because I'll just kind of wing it that day and see how things go. No, he was prepared. He'd even read the Caesar's Gallic Wars when he planned his battle strategies. And he was one of my heroes, always has been, because he knew how to fight a war. And then when he tried to tell the truth about what was really going on with the deal with the Nazis and the Allied powers, well, that was the end of his life.
Yeah, that was when he ended up getting whacked. They could call it whatever. It was not an automobile accident. It was an assassination.
But we have to study the enemy's ways. Because the battle now is not a matter of letting our military take over for it. That's over. The old way of war is over. This is fifth generation warfare, as they call it. And what that means is it's probably happening invisibly right in front of your face, but you don't even recognize it. But it's time for us to wake up to that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why they need to read your books.
Yeah.
They really do.
It's
fascinating. Well, I want you to have as much free reign as possible in talking about how they have weaponized our entire world against us, because there's so much here that people, it's one thing to say it, but when you actually start developing all the ways that they've done it, it becomes so obvious. And that's what I want you to impart to our listeners, is how they have incrementally built this system to use all this technology in a way that takes away all of our abilities to fight it.
Well, it started with various aerosol experiments, right? We all know that there was a time when they did an aerosol experiment in St. Louis, for example, to see how people would react, what their bodies would go through. And then we'd hear about it happening in, I remember when I was living in the UK, in England, there was the subway gassing that went on. And the similar thing happened in Japan. So we've always heard of the military using their own population for experimentation. Now, I could bring in the Cuban embassy, the recent terrible thing that happened there to U.S. embassy workers. That was, as soon as I heard about it, I knew it wasn't Cuba. There's no way they would do that to this giant America. No, it was America did that to its own embassy people. So I've seen this over decades. We heard about the Gulf War syndrome in the 2003 Gulf War, and how people came home and their entire families became ill. We being the military presence, has always used its own citizens, and usually in its own nation, or in the military sense, they would use it in a military base or in a U.S. embassy. What's happened now since HAARP was able to commandeer the ionosphere is that now this whole thing can be globalized. And it's the same thing I would say about cloud seeding. We hear about cloud seeding, we hear about various techniques of getting rid of drought on a local level. You get up there and you ionize the air, and you have a positive and negative ion rebalancing going on, and then the rain falls. Well, that's on a local level. But imagine that you have the technology by which you can control all of it. Mm-hmm. And that you control the climate over the decades, and you control the weather on a daily level. And that's the story of that. And the only question for people would be, well, why are they dropping all this crap on us that we're having to breathe? Well, at first I thought, long ago when I first started all this and had to learn everything by myself pretty much, I thought it was, oh, well, that's just the sort of fallout from these military programs that they feel they have to run in order to dominate, full spectrum dominate planet Earth, the sun, et cetera. But no, I realized over time that the more I examined the chemical nature of what they were dropping and the synergetic amalgams that would come from that, where they would come together, various chemical compositions. It all looked to be something to do with what was happening to our endocrine systems, what was happening to our red blood cells. Because I worked with Clifford Carnicom back in the early 2000s, looking through his microscope at blood samples and seeing that this roulet that we keep hearing about from the inoculations, there was a lot of roulet going on in people's blood from way before the inoculations, the serums, but was from what they were breathing from the chemical trails. So the blood cells looked very unhealthy. And then one day I was leaning over Clifford and looked through the microscope at my blood. And there I saw something sucking the iron out of my red blood cells. It was just vanishing. And my red blood cell was flattening like a pancake. So this idea that the chemical nature of what's being dumped on us has an agenda beyond the military program of controlling the weather for the sake of defense, so-called, really for offense. Because now, of course, what happened in Turkey, you can see it was political in nature. They got whammoed because they were not obeying what NATO wanted them to do. So then you see, okay, it has to do with biology, and then how do the electromagnetics play into this? Well, you know, the maintenance of an ionized atmosphere requires constant electromagnetism. You've got to have a lot going on there in order to keep everything ionized and snapping, you know, ready to go to action for electricity, for electromagnetic operations. So that was sort of a given. And that was what the second book was about, Under an Ionized Sky, where I lay out how the space fence has been developed to control it all. And that would include the laser operations of things like Starfire, which is a north-south laser system that is very important to moving weather systems, and another laser from satellite, laser from there, laser from all over the place. And then NEXRADs, outside radio stations, those big golf ball things, those are all radar installations. And then military radar installations and all of the rest, all of the equipment. And then coming out with the cell phones, so we have the cell towers, and we have fiber optics under the ground. We have fiber optics up in space too, I might add. So the electrifying of the entire planet, we're not talking regions anymore, talking planet, is exceedingly important in that is inimical to our etheric health completely. There's no other way to say it. But meanwhile, everybody now is addicted to carrying these little clever devices around that are really weapon systems. And, you know, some very sophisticated scientists, PhDs in electromagnetics are saying it's a weapon system, folks. It's a weapon system. It's a weapon system. But that doesn't seem good enough because you can, oh, I don't know what time it is. Let me ask my phone. So, you know, it's that's happening. Then the third part of my title, I'm going through the title, the nanotechnology. The nanotechnology is in all of it. It's in all the chemicals. There are the nanobots that have tiny computers in them, two-way computers, and they are, there's the nanosensors, same thing, they have computers in them, and they're collecting data that they're feeding, sending, transmitting to supercomputers or data centers like the one down in Utah, where it's then chewed up and spit out to the different agencies. And I mean, there are just so many agencies now. Oh my gosh, it's just like a Tower of Babel. And so you have this amazing nanotechnology that much of it is not about military programs out there somewhere, but is about getting them into us as the host in order to begin to work with it there through frequencies and chemistry and electromagnetics that are coming from, different systems in order to build a transhuman who will be obedient. So to me, I started out thinking, the main thing is it's a military program and it's classified. And DARPA was super involved. So this is very important. I got to let people know. That's where I started. And then slowly I began to realize, yeah, it is a military program, but the objective is much more than the SDI program, is much more than anything that you would think of in the old military way of thinking, the pre-fifth generation military way. This is about people breathing this in and changing their bodies and brains. Mm-hmm. And when did I realize that? About 10 years ago. I'd been in the movement for about 3 years. I'd worked with Clifford on the first book. He helped me with the first book. Billy Hayes helped me with the second book by just because he was MK Ultra. He'd been owned by the CIA since he was born. He had been programmed with everything electromagnetic. He was like a library in himself. I just had to say to him, well, what about this? Well, then the frequency is blah, 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 and the this, and the this, and the this. I mean, he was invaluable to me. But then they began giving him grand mal seizures when we'd go on radio shows together. And I had to quit working with him because I knew they were just going to kill him on a radio show. And it freaked out the hosts anyway to have a grand mal seizure. So Billy just died last year, bless his heart. And this next book I've just written will be dedicated just to him. So that's how I proceeded. Now, the synthetic biology part came in with gangbusters, with the scene of Wuhan. And I was already writing the third book by then. And I saw that scene in Wuhan with the 5G when they flipped on the 5G there. And I knew what I was looking at. I knew I was looking at 5G. I was not looking at a virus. Mm-hmm. It had nothing to do with a virus. It was a 5G flip on to make sure that they really can have that kind of immediate triggering with a 5G system. And then, we all know what got rolled out after that. It was a great opportunity to study what has been dumped on us for over 2 decades and how we breathed it in and how it is in us and transforming us along with what's on our skin. We're all coated with biofilm, which blocks our pores. I began to be able to correlate what was in the serum with what was coming down from the sky. Because I knew they were working together, because I knew that they were all getting their stuff from Big Pharma. It's all Big Pharma. Mm-hmm. And I had already studied Big Pharma in Nazi Germany with IG Farben in Nazi Germany, and then Tavistock Institute in the UK. These were the two big players of mind control, and certainly ran the camps where they were doing mass experimentation, just like they are now. Only the camp is the entire globe now. Mm-hmm. So, if you pay attention and you get the signature of what you're tracking, and I was, of course, tracking secret societies, foundations, the military, the UN, et cetera, all the usual suspects. If you really understand what you're tracking, even if they morph into something else, you'll recognize them because you've got their signature. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's very obvious, but look at all the time I've put into it because I had no guidance. I had no books I could go read that would lead me in this. I had to write the books, and when you're dealing with classified material on the internet, they have left a lot of it's all there, but you don't know how to contextualize it because you don't have the knowledge. So it's very time consuming. You're sailing by the seat of your pants, as I used to say. As a sailor I used to be in love with many years ago would say to me when we'd set out on his 505 catamaran, is sail by the seat of your pants. And it turns out that I'm pretty good at sailing by the seat of my pants because I can concentrate. I haven't been raised with TV. I've never owned a TV. I've never owned a cell phone. People in my building here ask me, well, if you don't own a TV, what do you do with yourself at night?
Oh, God.
That's hilarious. So anyway, is that what you had in mind, Dan?
Yeah, well, and what, we were talking, you were mentioning all the nanotechnology, but you mentioned the graphene oxide, because graphene oxide is such an integral part of this whole thing, because that's basically the antennas. That's the way that the electromagnetics can be brought into the human being and be read by the human being, and that can be tied in with the computer interface, the artificial intelligence, this sort of stuff. Talk a little bit about that, that connection.
Well, yeah, and the graphene oxide is very interesting. I wouldn't say it's okay. So when I think graphene oxide, I think GBH, graphene-based hydrogel, and the graphene-based hydrogel is something that I think I first learned from Solemn, right? What's her first name?
Celeste.
Solemn. Yeah. I think she's the one who led me down that path, which I'm so grateful for. And I was finally able to meet her at the Red Pill conference I spoke at. The GBH, the hydrogel, has the graphene oxide in it, and that whole composition is the antenna system. Yes, you're right. But another thing graphene oxide can do, and it might even be that it's changing at that point into graphene hydroxide, which I don't know if you remember, but there was a wonderful German physicist, or he had a PhD. I think he was a chemist. He did a video with his wife. It was all very brief. It was just boom like that. I'm not remembering, it starts with an N, but I'm not remembering his name right now. He came, they did a video, and the video had a lot of play for just a few days, and then it started disappearing, in which he said, when the graphene oxide encounters hydrogen in the body, then it will produce graphene hydroxide, which acts as razor blades in the veins and the arteries of the body.
Right.
And so then suddenly someone's beating at the door in the video. It all happened in the video. And in comes a troop of killers, government killers, and he's killed right there on camera.
Wow.
Right there.
I did not know that, but I'm familiar with what you're talking about. Yeah.
So I'm thinking, given the myocarditis, given what the embalmers are finding in the veins and arteries, that is sort of a long, obviously polymer that they can kind of stretch, and these people's veins and arteries get blocked up. And in the case of the graphene hydroxide, it would be that, it's all the epithelial tissue inside is all chopped to pieces. Well, that's not going to help your health. So the graphene oxide, as far as what I am going to be writing again in this next synthetic biology book, is that the hope is that they will be able to make it into alternate nerves and nerve endings, and utilize it in that way for the cyber transhuman. So one way you can take a look at it to see what their hope is if you look at there's a video out, I think it's called Teslaforation. Teslaforation is a technique for building lattice work. What did Elon Musk call it? Neural mesh. And that's what I think they're going to use it for, because if I just look at graphene oxide, and I have some really good, it's cell nature, it's two-dimensional, which sounds crazy to us because we're used to a 3D world, but it's two-dimensional. And it looks like a deflated, sort of falling over box when it is in the blood or in the serum. Both cases, it looks the same. But when it gets into the body where it's warm, it activates, and then the black carbon composite that it is begins to move into a way that looks just like Teslaphoresis, which is it's laying long lines of carbon, of graphene in the body that will be used as nerves, would be not just my guess, but is the guess of others whose names I don't remember right now. So that's how I think of graphene oxide. It is to be, because when you look at its behavior in other things, now we're using it from the sky. They're delivering it from the sky as well, because they use it for the polar vortex, for making fake ice and snow. The graphene is very useful for that. So I know every winter we're breathing in lots of graphene oxide. And some people are probably eating it, thinking it's snow. But there's so many uses for the graphene oxide. I hope to be able to pull together a list that I could just list them, because it's such a versatile technology, and it's nanotech, remember, but so is Morgellons, and Morgellons was really the first step to the GBH, the graphene-based hydroxide. Both Morgellons and the hydroxide have the same chemical components in them, and Clifford Carnicom is now writing papers on this, because he's come back into the fray. And is definitely looking at a lot of the things that will correlate the Morgellons of yesteryear, which, by the way, is not yesteryear, because Morgellons has been found in masks that people are wearing, and in the PCR swab tests. So the Morgellons is still being used, but anyway, Clifford is tying them together.
That's fascinating. Well, when you talk about the nanobots, I'm gonna say something. It'll be a little bit controversial, but Mary Fanning contacted me the other day, and Mary was talking about that there is military intelligence now that is talking about the Chinese have put nanobots and nanotechnology in various things around military bases in the United States in ways that very similar to what Michael Crichton prayed, where they can self-replicate and they can self-assemble.
That's right.
And that this technology, that there's actually evidence that the Chinese military has been doing that, importing that into the United States so that they can take out our military capability.
Well, my 2 cents on that, when I read that, when you sent it to me, this sounds, we do all that. We do all that they're attributing to the Chinese. It just sounds like another blame the Russians thing to me for what we ourselves are doing. So but you brought me to something very important to say about the smart cities. The whole smart city, and I'll have a big section on the smart city in the next book on the synthetic biology.
Dynamite.
We've got nanosensors in the sidewalks, in the streets, in the air, in the water, in the food supply. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. How many times do I need to say that? It's so tiny. Like, you know, when you take out your dust rag and you're dusting your house, that dust that you're pulling up, most of it is smart dust. Okay, let's just be clear. This is everywhere now. And so when this is being attributed to the Chinese, I'm sure they have their own program going hot and heavy too, but we have it as well. I don't think there's anywhere certainly in a smart city or near a freeway. I mean, I'm trying to think, if I were rural, would I have less? Yeah, I think I would have less. But then rural, I have the power lines to deal with. And the power lines are very useful in all of this to keep the space fence locked down completely intact. So I don't really feel that rural living is going to help much. It's in the soil. Certainly, and I talk. You haven't brought up the geoengineered fires because maybe I talked about it last time. I think I mentioned it at the conference. The use of nanotechnology in the geoengineered fires. First of all, they use probably laser or LiDAR, or maybe masers from the sky to ignite. To bring an ignition in an area. But then it falls to the laptop boys, as I call them, who are wherever, certainly remote, maybe in Colorado Springs or Denver or Dallas or something. And they will then direct the phalanxes of nanobots, resurrect them, the aluminum oxide nanobots in the soil, which I've read that the soil now is compacted the first 6 inches with almost all aluminum oxide, by the way.
Wow.
For farmers to hear that. You'd have to really turn that soil. And so that they'll resurrect those nanobots and organize them. They can program them from a distance. And maybe they'll even make them self-assemble if they need more, self-replicate. And then they form a phalanx. And then they are sent to the various places that have been marked for destruction. And they will then destroy those houses. And you'll see them crawling up. It looks like embers when you first look at it in some of the footage that is taken remotely of these things working, and they'll crawl up a house, and they almost have a Roman army phalanx structure, like an arrow point going up, being led up, zzz, up they go, and they'll ignite that wall and that fire. And once they've got it going, then they all come back down and they go even on the highway. I actually have seen footage of them racing along the highway. And when you look at them, you think, oh, those look like embers. But Jamie Lee, who is a videographer friend, he was in Paradise, California, and watching very closely when the entire city was destroyed. And he could see them racing down the road, they look like embers, but there was no wind blowing that day, said Jamie. There was no wind. So their motility is moving, and they're being used for these so-called wildfires, which are anything but wild.
Well, and we've actually I've been hearing about that for I think now for about 4 years, because it was and they were trying to say it was Antifa and some of these other groups, but then it was coming out of the atmosphere. It wasn't attributed to any individual. It was coming out of the atmosphere. So.
Well, and if you understand the technology, this world will make a lot more sense. I mean, that's got to be attractive to people, right, Dan? Because I mean, if you're
power mad, absolutely, yeah.
Because I think the idea that it's somehow not important to understand technology because you've never liked science or you don't have much self-esteem in your ability to concentrate on these sorts of things. I think really what the bottom line is that this is where you live and this is when you live, and take advantage of it and get your consciousness to grow in order to understand how this is being done to us. This is not a mystical thing. And I don't have to import aliens or anything. I've got enough human beings that I can concentrate on. Now, as to their relationship with their true humanity, I can't speak to that, because I do believe that if they abandon their true humanity, their values, their morality, their ethos, well, then I don't know what's in those people. Because there are many ways for entities to take over people who've abandoned their humanity. We just have to look at Satanists to see that.
Well, you're right about that, but I laugh when you say that about people say, well, I'm really not into history, or I'm not into technology, or I'm not into this or that. And I have a lot of friends that tell me, well, I like reading a good novel. What could be more fascinating and more interesting than understanding what is going on in our world right now and the diabolical nature of all this? I mean, you couldn't write anything more interesting than this.
I don't think so. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. That's why I recommend people start with Sub Rosa America. That'll be about the past we just came out of. That'll take us up to right now. And now other writers are going to have to, and I hope to be one once I get, these geoengineering books done, to write about this time and really look at it from a more spiritual, psychological point of view.
Well, I have not read Sub Rosa America, but I am going to go online and order it, because sounds like a fascinating kind of a precursor to a lot of the other stuff that you've worked on. It sounds like it'd be really, really interesting.
Yeah, and you and I are from the same generation, aren't we?
Yeah.
60s generation. And then to get the books, by the way, as long as we're at the end, right, Dan?
Yeah, we're getting close. Yeah.
To get the books, I recommend going through the Rudolf Steiner bookstore in Seattle. It's a teeny weeny little cottage industry kind of thing. I like supporting people who use their own initiative. They carry everything I've written, interestingly enough. Rudolf Steiner Bookstore, that's the name of it. Easy to find. It's in Seattle. And you can go to Amazon. Everything's on Amazon too. And, you know, it is what it is. And then I have a site called elanafreeland.com that is run by my web mistress, who does a great job. I never have time to go there, so I depend on her, and she's created an amazing looking place because she's very artistic. And otherwise, I post every day on the one Facebook site that Facebook still allows me. It's called EMF Planetary Engineering. And I also post at gab.com group section called Geoengineered Transhumanism with Elana Freeland. And I think it's well worth going there because not only do I have all the geoengineering, I also have, I talk some about pedophilia, MK Ultra, all the things I'm interested in. The dark side, I suppose you'd have to say, the underbelly. I will post there.
Mm-hmm. The underbelly of the beast. That's yes. What you really want to explore. Yes. So,
yeah, right. Wow. Man.
Well, I'll tell you what, the time goes so fast when you're on as a guest. It's like we're fast friends. Like we could have been friends 50, 60 years ago, and we would have been talking about similar kind of things, really.
Yeah, that's right.
Because that's kind of I guess it's the way we were raised, the generation we were in. We were the critical thinkers. We were still critical thinkers.
We were still critical thinkers. And I also think of being a historian by trade, I've read a lot of histories, a lot of really good histories, in fact, that we don't carry in this country, but where there are generations that seem to have a certain signature. And I would say that the 60s generation, whatever people may think of it because of Time magazine and all that nonsense, it was loaded with people who were Renaissance characters. They were extremely gifted, extremely intelligent, and we lost some of them to drugs when the CIA and COINTELPRO got very serious. But that's the generation we came from, and I am so grateful, Dan, because it encourages me in the time we live in that I had that experience.
Mm-hmm. And we can teach. We can teach because we did have a chance to grow up at a time when creative, deductive reasoning, being able to work through, think outside of the box. It was part of that generation. No question about it. It was.
And then it was in the 70s when they began to attack the educational system. Boom. And I followed that from there on. I knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah. Well, Lana, thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you, Dan. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Well, let's see if we can get you back at another Red Pill, because your message on transhumanism is mind-blowing. And I want to remind our listeners and our viewers, buy your books because they're fabulous. They really are.
Yeah,
they are really good. Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you again. Dan. I see Patrick's ready to go with the campaign show. So, Patrick, take it from here. Thank you, my friend. I look forward to seeing your show.
Thank you, Dan. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the campaign show. As the world, as the United States of America, and perhaps the galaxy itself is going through some unprecedented tumult right now. Pamphlet, are you with me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, boy.
I'm on deck.
Isn't this fun? Do you feel like we're in the movie Signs right now?
Yeah, it's pretty much like Independence Day. We're there.
I don't like Independence Day because they come together at the end and form a one world government. And they're like, must come together, and there are no countries anywhere. This is the world's Independence Day. Remember that psyop? By the way, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do greatest alien movies and worst alien movies ever on the show today in the second hour.
I dig it.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, now let's not jump the gun here. We know about Project Bluebeam. We know that they've been planning to use some kind of fake alien invasion to impose a one world government for quite some time. Then again, there are these unidentified flying objects, these flying saucers, so to speak, which obviously exist because they've been recorded so many times, documented so many times, and obviously aircraft that is much more advanced than the aircraft that we know about. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to stick to the facts. We're going to look at everything that's going on. And keep in mind, China has been blamed for the recent spy balloon that was shot down.